Hello and welcome to Year 2 of the Plant-Based Transformation Summit. I'm Margot Freitag, your host for this fantastic interview series where we are discussing the profound effects of plant-based living. I am honored to be able to bring to you the most current and relevant information around a whole foods plant-based diet from the most credible and knowledgeable expert in the field. Discussing plant-based living as it relates to your health, your weight, your energy, your spirit, our planet, and our beloved Earthlings. On a mission to help you achieve a healthy body and a happy life you love. And I'm delighted to introduce you to Dr. Doug Graham. Dr. Graham studied nutrition primarily to enhance his own sports performance from an early age. In college, where he majored in health and phys ed, he took every nutrition course offered. Going through his chiropractic training, he again took every nutrition course offered, studying nutrition every year while going through school. Dr. Graham has shared his strategies for success with audiences at more than 4,000 events and gatherings worldwide. He gives keynote presentations and seminars guaranteed to educate, motivate, and inspire. And as well as his bestseller, 80-10-10, he has authored the High Energy Diet Recipe Guide, Prevention and Care of Athletic Injuries, Brain Damage, Nutrition and Athletic Performance, and the just released Perpetual Health 365. Welcome, Dr. Graham.
Oh, thank you so much, Margot. It's a treat to be here with you.
Well, it's a treat for us too, believe me. Thank you very much for joining our summit. I wondered if we can go back to the beginning of your story about how you discovered a plant-based and raw vegan diet and how it transformed your life.
It's a great question, and I've listened to so many people answer this question in different ways. For me, I didn't know where I was heading towards. It wasn't that somebody said, oh, aim for this and you'll be heading in a good direction. This was back in the 60s. I was meandering around, looking for ways to control my weight because most of the sports I did depended upon a strength-to-weight ratio, strength to body weight. So if I could be a few pounds lighter and stay as strong as I was, then I could do better in my sport. Pretty much like most Americans, my family was getting bigger and we didn't want to be, and we were looking for ways to control our weight, so we started eating this, that, and the next. I didn't know what I was doing. When I was in high school, I started eating a bunch more plants, but I think I just started eating a bunch more of everything in high school because, I was a growing athlete. And it wasn't really until college that the big changes started to happen. They say people go vegetarian for three main reasons: environment and health and animal rights, and I didn't do it for any of those reasons. I was living on my own and didn't have the money to buy the expensive foods. Those were almost always meats, and so I started eating a lot more plant and a lot more tubers and things that didn't cost much. And next thing I knew, when I was talking about my diet with a friend of mine who mentioned she was a vegetarian, and I go, now that I think about it, I am too. It wasn't something I did intentionally, but once I thought about it, I stuck with it and remained a vegetarian for the better part of 7 years before I knew enough to do the vegan experiment, which is how I faced it. I said, well, let's just see what happens. And I went vegan for a period of about 8 months. And by then, once again, I had been inundated with information about raw foods. So I continued the experiment and said, okay, I'll do a month of raw food. Let's see what happens. Well, 2 weeks into the experiment, I already made the commitment. It was so profoundly much better that I just said, well, I'm going to figure out how to do this and do it forever because the results are so profound. I could think more clearly. I could breathe more easily. I was dropping weight effortlessly. My skin cleared up. All the right things happened. My need for sleep dropped by almost 20%, and I still felt as rested as ever. It was just profound. So I said, okay, I got to learn how to do this. And it did take me, admittedly, about another 7 years to figure out how to succeed on an all-raw diet. That's the story.
So it's an incredible story because most people read some books and it's not a trial and error kind of thing. You followed how you felt, really, it sounds like.
Well, the information is available now. Back then, it truly wasn't available. When I decided to become a vegan, most people didn't know what that meant. The word was so uncommon. I mean, even out in California, the word was uncommon. And I lived on the East Coast, and I was working, giving presentations You know, as a chiropractor, giving presentations most weekends on health and fitness and nutrition, and a guy asked me to come to Alabama and do a talk to his business group of about 80 men, and he said, just whatever you do, don't say that V word. And I said, no, I'll just tell them that I'm a hunter and I sneak up on plants. I mean, it was just unknown, and now it's become so common with access to the information and so many more people. The numbers have either doubled, I think 4 times the number of vegans has doubled 4 times since I went vegan back when. So it's much, much easier. I asked all the raw food leaders in the world that I could find at the time when I first got interested in raw food, because that's the way I am. I just go right to the source. And I asked every raw food leader, people who'd written books and whatnot, in the world, all 5 of them. Now there's thousands of them leading the way. And I'm glad for that. I'm glad there's so many more teachers out there. But I also went to a bunch of doctors and asked them what the people that I considered to be the premier health knowledgeable people in the world. And I asked them, if I was going to design a diet for athletes, what would it be? And they said, it would be a raw food diet, but we don't know how to do it because nobody's ever done it. So that's what I did.
So you designed this based on the highest quality?
Well, I designed it partly based on highest quality, but I really designed it based on the nutrition recommendations that we already have, except I applied those recommendations to raw food rather than cooked food, knowing that we need a certain amount of protein and a certain amount of carbohydrate and a certain amount of fat, and we need all those things, and how much fruit and how much veggie and how much of other things to eat in order to meet those generally accepted nutritional recommendations that are already in existence.
So how would you describe it? What does it look like? What does this food...
What does my diet look like nowadays?
Yeah.
Well, for the last 25 years, I've followed pretty much the same diet, and it's been a diet that is heavily predominated by fruit. I mean, people notice that I eat a lot of fruit. I eat more what I'll call salad greens or salad fixins. It depends what part of the country you're from. I eat more vegetables than most people in America eat. I mean, I eat a big salad every night. I eat a big salad. And I enjoy my salad, and I love to fill up on that. I like to eat volume. I've always enjoyed eating volume of food. I've always been an athlete, so, you know, I'm notorious for eating a lot. But I eat all the fruit I care for. I eat all the vegetables I want. I include some nuts and seeds, and that's pretty much as far as my diet strays. The beauty of that is that in the course of the year, nature provides me with about 250 different fruits to choose from and 50 different vegetables and maybe a dozen or 24 different nuts and seeds to try. So, I mean, I eat more variety than people who just have a hamburger every day for lunch.
Right, right. Dr. Graham, is this idea that there may be a different dietary requirements for different kinds of people? You know, everyone's so different. And so shouldn't we all eat something different? Are there different requirements for different people?
This is a yes and no question. Are we all different? Yes, we're all different, and we certainly need to make allowance for that. Some people like apples, and some people don't like apples. Some people like lettuce, and other people don't. Part of the yes answer is because at this point in time, humans are actually more ill than we've ever been before in history. We have more ailments. We have all the old ailments plus all the new ones. We're not doing well in terms of our health or our fitness or our almost any area of wellness that we want to endeavor to really pursue. So we are seeing people with some unusual conditions. There is always that individual with an unusual condition. But what nature has taught us is something that's called species specific. What this means is that in nature, each species eats a specific diet. And so if we look at an animal like the Central American sloth, well, the Central American sloth eats about 90 different forms of vegetation. But any individual sloth only eats about 40 or 45 different kinds of vegetation. This allows for a greater density of sloth in the jungle, right? Because they can share. You like this leaves off this tree, I like the leaves off the next. What the scientists teach us is that all animals have a species-specific diet, and otherwise a zookeeper would not know what to feed the animals. Right. And then they go on to say, but human beings are an exception. but give no rationale for that. I look at our anatomy, I look at our physiology, I see who we're like, and there is a rule in that guideline of zoology that says that animals that are anatomically and physiologically similar will thrive on a similar diet. So although horses and cows both eat grass out of a pasture, they do eat slightly different grass, but they both graze. So you might want to eat bananas, and I might want to eat melon, but we're both eating fruit. Our species-specific dietary requirements and our nutritional requirements align with us being biologically adapted to fruits and vegetables. And that's what should predominate in our diet. Are we all the same in that regard? Yes. Are we all different? Sure. There's about 1 million or 1.2 million. People have told me now there's about 1.2 million differences between you and I. But there's quadrillions of similarities. The similarities outweigh the differences by millions to one. So we must eat according to those similarities and allow for the fact that you like pears and I like persimmon.
Right, right. Very interesting. I wonder if you can tell us about 80-10-10, this bestseller book of yours. It's received so much attention all over the world over the last 10 years. We've got stars like Beyonce and Demi Moore using it, and tennis star Martina Navratilova, and basketball legend Ronnie Grandison. All of these people are embracing 80-10-10. I wondered if you could tell us about that and how this all fits together.
I'm happy to do that. I've had some practice. As I mentioned earlier, I searched around for a raw food diet that I could stick with. I kept finding myself going back to cooked starches, and I couldn't figure out why. You know, it was either bread, rice, pasta, corn, potatoes. So if I went off my raw diet, it was to eat more cooked starches. And eventually what I did was went back to the basic sciences that detail what are our human nutritional requirements. And what they tell us is that around the world, people eat about 11% of their calories from protein. It doesn't seem to matter what diet we're on. It doesn't vary more than a few percentage points. It could go down to 7 or up to 14 or 15 even, but around the world, people average about 11% of their calories from protein. But where we seem to be going astray is in our consumption of fat, or I'll say our overconsumption of fat. Fats didn't used to be so readily available, certainly not to the general population. You couldn't go to the store and just buy bottles of oil or endless fatty foods, and butter was a rare commodity, and da-da-da-da. So fat was much harder to access, and it's only been in the last 120 years that we've been doing what we call the high-fat experiment on human beings. It's basically been since we've had internal combustion engines to allow us to farm in much greater quantities and then raise the cattle and other livestock in greater quantities than we used to be able to. And in that last 120 years, we've seen human health go through dramatic decline, weight go through the roof, and a bunch of other issues, including climate issues. So what happened was I looked at the sports science, the health science, the noetic science, which is about brain chemistry, and then what you call the disease science, the studies on heart disease, cancer, diabetes. What I found out was that since the 1950s, so we're not talking about news anymore, but since the 1950s, articles have been appearing in the Journal of the American Medical Association explaining how the high consumption of fat negatively influences our health. And then articles started appearing in various sports science magazines and textbooks explaining how the high consumption of fat interferes with athletic performance. The oncology people, people who study cancers, showed us quite clearly that if we increase the amount of fat in our diet, we increase our propensity for developing cancers. The people with heart disease did the same thing. The people with diabetes did the same thing, dating all the way back to the 50s. And just recently, about 4 or 5 years ago, a medical doctor who now has access to much better technology showed us in brilliant graphic descriptions how if he monitors his own blood chemistry, eats a big fatty meal and then continues to monitor his own blood chemistry, which was normal at the start, that simply by eating that big fatty meal, he can actually push himself right into diabetes. So between cancer, heart disease, diabetes, athletic performance, all of these factors pointed to reducing the fat in the diet dramatically. In fact, to about 1/4 of the fat that we currently eat in America, which is about 42% of our calories from fat. And so I said, well, gee, what would happen if I developed a low-fat compared to standard American diet? If I actually got our fat consumption in line with the recommendations, what a concept to actually do what we're told. So I said, where does that leave us? Well, it actually left us with a lot of carbohydrates to consume, whereas the standard American diet only has about 45% of its calories in carbs. All of a sudden, I'm looking at consuming almost double that, 80% of calories from carbs. Hence 80-10-10. It's not a number we aim for. It's just some guidelines to be aware of. But then it was odd because I talked to a psychologist who informed me that more than 75% of all psychological food-related issues deal with the overconsumption of sugars and starches, carbohydrates. People have problems with their carbohydrates. And I looked at that and I go, well, I'm not at all surprised. If you're eating half the carbohydrates you need, only 40% of your calories from carbs when you really need more than 80, I'd have issues. Once in a while I'd want to binge too. So I allow myself all the carbohydrates I wish for. I eat sweet and juicy food, which is what everybody wants. Everybody wants sweet and juicy. It's just we use coffee and cake or milk and cookies, but everybody wants sweet and juicy. So I have all the fruit I want at my breakfast meal, all the fruit I want at my lunch meal, enough to carry me through to the next meal. I eat all the fruit I care for before dinner, and then I have my big salad and maybe some nuts or seeds or avocados or something fatty enough to give me the fats that I require. And bingo. It just clicked into place like putting a microscope into focus. And all of a sudden, I had no desire to eat anything other than fruits and vegetables. All of a sudden, I stopped snacking, which before that I used to just continually snack. Now I was eating my meals and completely sat. I stopped thinking about food except to just sit down, eat a meal, and then walk away from the table, be completely satisfied for 4, 5, 6 hours, then eat the next meal. My creativity, my productivity, my athletic performance all went up. My need for sleep went down. My mental clarity went, like, I was learning new languages. I'd never been able to do that in my entire life. My recall improved. My vocabulary improved. I was just shocked. I was always the world's worst with names. I used to claim it, in fact. I tell people, hey, don't even bother telling me your name because I'm the world's worst at remembering it. And all of a sudden I started remembering names, and people come up to me 10, 15, 20 years later, and I know their name, and they're just shocked. And so am I, that I still remember. And I was talking with a friend of mine just a few days ago about some stuff that happened in the late 90s, and he was shocked that I could remember the details of a conference that I attended in the late 90s and what other people said when they spoke to me and what messages I gave to the people at that conference, what were my topics. So for me, I've discovered, and I'm sure everyone else knows, that when you find something better, you don't crave the old thing that you used to have. You know, if you move to a better car, you don't crave your old car. If you move to a better girlfriend or boyfriend, you don't crave the old one. A better partner in life, you don't crave the old one. If you move to a nicer house, you don't miss your old one. And I stumbled upon a better diet, and I do not crave my old one.
Right, it makes so much sense. So much sense. Okay, so you're a proponent of eating a lot more fruit and vegetables and less fat. Now, there are obviously these health and fitness benefits of eating less fat and more fruit and vegetables. What about making sure, obviously we do need some fat, and I know you talk about nuts and seeds. Is it enough for things like fat-soluble vitamins and other things that we need fats for?
It turns out that fruits and vegetables of their own, although we don't think of them as fatty foods, and certainly they're not highly fatty foods, but it turns out that if you were on some island where the only thing you could access was fresh fruits and fresh vegetables, you'd still be getting about 7% of your calories from fat. What the scientists have said when they've looked into this as a, let's study what would happen if you ate no fat, they say that as long as we're eating more than about 3% of our calories from healthy fat sources, that we'll have no problem with getting enough omegas, getting enough essential fatty acids, absorbing our fat-soluble vitamins appropriately, on and on and on. So already we've doubled that well into a safety margin. But at the other end of the spectrum, the scientists that study performance and health and disease, they've all told us that once we range much into the teens in terms of fat percentage, they can measure and monitor health decline. And so we're really sort of stuck between about 3 and 20. By the time we hit 20, we're compromising health. And if we go much below 3, we're compromising health. The midpoint there comes out somewhere around 10, doesn't it? So yes, it's enough without being too much. The problem is that when we eat too much fat, we have to eat less of something else, whether it's protein or carb, and then we're not going to get enough of those.
Okay, so how can we tell if we're not eating enough fruit? And I'm talking about the royal we, the people who are not ready
Sure, it's easy.
Raw.
That's an easy thing, Mark. If you experience cravings, you're probably not eating enough fruit. So if you crave sweets at the end of a meal, as we've all been taught to do, right? We save our dessert till the end because our mother taught us that if you eat sweets at the beginning of the meal, the words may have been spoil your appetite, but essentially what she's saying is if you eat sweets, they'll satisfy you, which is the whole point of eating. Our whole reason for eating is to satisfy ourselves. So if we're craving sweets at the end of a meal, you didn't eat enough fruit at the beginning of the meal. It's just that straightforward. If you crave sweets in between meals, you get to that 10 o'clock or 3 o'clock and you're like, oh, I need something sweet. So it's candy or alcohol or chocolate or refined sugars or dried fruit even. If you're craving sweets in between meals, you didn't eat enough fruit at the meal. If you're looking around for something heavy at the end of the meal, and it doesn't matter what it is, you just want something really rich, then you eat it, what you're going to find is that afterwards you're still looking around for something sweet because the rich thing didn't satisfy, didn't result in the rise in blood sugar that we associate with satiation. And then, of course, if you ever look at starchy food, bread, rice, pasta, corn, potatoes, pasta, whatever it is, by the time you start looking at complex carbohydrates as if they were actually food, because in a real natural human setting, none of those things would be food for human beings. Again, we use nature as our model. Not that nature is so altruistic or kind or anything else, and natural is not the point, but we have to learn from nature. I mean, nature does teach us some things, and then the model nature set up for us is that every creature eats raw food. So if we're starting to look at we have to cook food in order to get our complex carbohydrates to meet our carbohydrate needs, that's a surefire sign that you're simply not eating enough carbohydrates from fresh fruit. So there's 4 easy ways. They're all to do with cravings. If you're ever craving in any way for starches or sugar at any point, you're just not eating enough fruit. And the reason that happens is because we have no model. We don't know people to model how much fruit are we designed to actually eat. So when the studies came out that resulted in the 5-a-day recommendations, those studies actually suggested that we should be eating between 30 to 50 servings a day of fruits and vegetables. But the scientists and the politicians and everybody else said, well, nobody's going to do that. Let's just dumb it down to 5. And now they're talking about dumbing it down to 3.
Yeah.
But the recommendations were for 50.
Okay, so that makes so much sense to me, and I'm a real fruit lover, so it's all good news for me. What about, how can you tell if somebody's not eating enough vegetables?
There's only one craving associated with insufficient vegetable intake, and it's the same craving every time for everyone. We will crave salt. If we crave salt or salty foods or add salt or want to put salt or need salt or feel like we're just not getting enough salt, you're not eating enough vegetables. It's as straightforward as rocket science. It's really clear. If you crave salt, you haven't been eating enough vegetables, increase the vegetables in your life, and you will not even think. I mean, Vegetables are our source of all of the mineral salts. We have more than a dozen mineral salts in our body, including our sodium chloride. But we have more than a dozen different salts that we find within ourselves, and we get them all in high concentration from our vegetables.
Right. Interesting. Tell us, please, Dr. Graham, some advice, some nuggets of advice that you could suggest for somebody to easily start to change the way they eat for the better.
Well, there's two things. One is to understand what food quality means. And there are 6 determining words that we can use. And you can just look at the food on your plate and say, oh, well, if I say eat more whole food, eat more fresh food, eat more ripe, raw, organic plants. And if you're eating more whole, fresh, ripe, raw, organic plants, or any one of those factors, depends how gradual you want to go about things, how long you think you're going to live, how long you can keep disease at bay, how slowly you want to reap the benefit of doing the right thing for yourself and feeling better. But whole, fresh, ripe, raw, organic plants, those are the 6 keywords that if I want to know about food quality and say, well, okay, I want to evaluate, let me increase the percentage of whole food in my diet or on my plate or however you wish to say. That's the easy parameters to look at. But it turns out in real life, the easy way to change your diet is overnight. You know, if you're a heroin addict, they don't wean you off. And if you're an alcoholic destroying your life, they don't wean you off. If you're trying to stop child molesting, we don't gradually slow down. If you want to change, you change. And this leaves us with the best results, with the easiest results, with the quickest benefits accrued, the lowest recidivism rate. And, you know, it's like learning to swim. The easiest way is to get in the water.
Right. That's great advice. So whole, fresh, ripe, raw, organic plants.
That's what
Dr.
it says on my
Graham,
shirt.
Is that right? That's great. I want that shirt. Dr. Graham, we are at the end of our time together. Dr. Graham, thank you so much for this, and thank you so much for spending time with us today and sharing all this very important information with us.
It's a treat. I appreciate you very much giving me the opportunity to express my views and share some of the current science in health with people today. I know people are dying for lack of information and suffering for lack of information. And when they have the right information, I have every confidence that people will make better decisions.
I agree. Couldn't agree more. Thank you so much, Dr. Graham. Take care.
Okay. Thank you again.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.